once again for the MicroPython Meetup. Here's the links that are most commonly used, so they're right there on the first slide. If you can sponsor MicroPython, please go and do so. It's also worth catching Damien's talk at PyCon. He talks a little bit about how much sponsoring is contributing to MicroPython now. It's actually not insignificant, so which is great. Just me tonight. Yeah, been easy. Barry, thanks again. Yeah, for future Barry for making this video. Meetup videos are available on MicroPython's official YouTube account now, which is at MicroPython, YouTube at MicroPython. There's still a bunch of the old ones that are on my account, my personal account, so feel free to go there as well. Headlines, so MicroPython core news. 1.21 is still coming. I spoke to Damien, or I spoke to Jim about this yesterday. I think the last feature, which is to do with SSL, in particular about HTTPS, is the last thing to go. So it's taking a little while to figure out. So stay tuned. Don't be too vicious in your requests for where is 121, because Damien's working on it very hard. Well, Andrew. There's a new machine.can driver that's been proposed, and Gus is managing that one. It's PR 12337. So if you've got any CAN knowledge, we'd really appreciate some comments on that one. We do have CAN support for the STM port, but it's kind of bound quite closely to the STM driver in the way that it presents CAN as a concept. So this is trying to be a generic cross-port implementation of CAN. So yeah, if you've got any experience, that'd be great. Sort of similarly, machine.counter and machine.encoder, Jim had pulled together a couple of PRs that had been in the system for quite some time. These are ESP32 implementations, but they're designed to be generic. So ESP32 is effectively the first port that gets counter and encoder, mostly because there was PRs that fleshed those out pretty thoroughly. Again, feedback on those APIs would be really good to get. That PR hasn't been merged yet, but it looks in pretty good shape, so I don't expect that one to take too long. Speaking of Jim, he put together a guide on using Git in MicroPython. So some of the specifics around that we require signing, some of the common trips about formatting and that kind of stuff. So that's worth taking a look at if you've ever stumbled trying to get a PR into MicroPython. I know Seon's had fun with that.
I'm doing it right now. Let's see what happens.
There's a comment there. Where is that guide somewhere? It's in the link here. If you search for Jimmo and get in MicroPython until I share these slides, you should be able to find it that way. But yeah, Jim Mussered, I think it just goes by Jimmo on Git, so hopefully that's easy enough to find. If not, the link is right there, which I can probably click on and show you. There it is. Yeah, so Jimmo, Git and MicroPython. Well, now I'm going to have to return to my slides, aren't I? That will be fun. Where is it gone? Right. Where is the screen again? In other news, the STM32H5 has had a whole bunch of PRs that have been pulled into mainline. The H5 is a really powerful chip that's quite cheap and seems to be readily available from ST. It looks like they're sort of trying to push it, I guess, as a popular chip, popular sort of general purpose chip. Yeah, we've got really good support now for a lot of the timers and that kind of stuff. And there's been a bunch of other ESP32 stuff. In particular, there's the Wi-Fi CoPro work. Robert's implemented some of that on the SAMD and Linux RT, I think.
Yes.
They clicked on that. Yeah, cool. This came from some of the work from Ibrahim from the Arduino work. So some of that went into the Arduino boards. So that means, sorry, I should explain. That's where you've got you've got a board. It might have RP2040 or it might be any micro, but it's using an ESP32 purely as a Wi-Fi coprocessor. So it allows that scenario pretty easily over two different protocols. And Bluetooth, yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, it's a radio coprocessor, is what I should call it. Yeah. There's also the variant support, which has gone in a little while ago, which is going to confuse everyone a little bit for this release. Variant allows you to say, when you're building a board, you can say, I want to build this board with this variant. And the idea here is that you often get boards with like flash variants or slightly different, like the same board effectively, but slightly different configurations. And part of that work also included SPIRAM detection. So previously you had to choose whether you're going to build with SPIRAM or without. All of the builds now can detect that for ESP32. So both of those just change how you build ESP32 firmware just a little bit. So there'll probably be a little confusion when 121 does drop. And I'll try and put together like a table and stuff to clarify that perhaps next meetup.
I'm pretty sure the SPIRAM detection is for everything except the OG.
I think you're right, actually.
I think the original ESP32 can't auto detect, but all the newer cores, all the newer chips, it's built in.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, annoying.
Pretty sure.
Yep, I think that's right. I got a couple of comments there. I should put some machine counter and machine counter around. Yes, Robert, it's I'm glad we got machine counter and machine coder finally in. It's been a tricky one, and I think a lot of it was confounded, I guess, because different ports have different ways of doing counters and encoders. It took a long time for Damien and Jim, I think, to get their heads around what a generic port should look like. So, yeah. But very happy they've finally gotten in there. I know there was a few people upset about the fact that those PRs have been open for a long time, but Jim's done a really good job of pulling all the important stuff together. So. It's good. Oh yeah, congrats and thanks to Ambrella in particular, who puts in the most effort. But Adafruit put out a Python on hardware newsletter every week, and they recently just actually used the 250th newsletter, which, when you think about it, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. There's a lot of effort that goes into each of the newsletters, and to have 250 of them is pretty amazing. So thanks, Anne, and everyone else who contributes to that. If you haven't subscribed, it's a really good newsletter to be part of. Lots more stuff than I can cover every month. So this is really cool. There's a new campaign by BBC Education to build on their previous one, which, if you hadn't heard, there was a whole bunch of microbits built a number of years ago now, and sent out to many high schools in the UK. I think it was high schools. I meant to go check that out. The new campaign is actually targeting younger kids, like 8 to 11-year-olds. So for primary schools. They're building 675,000 of these things, and the primary schools can apply for a free pack of 30 microbits. And there's a whole campaign driven by the government to get more interest with children and STEM tech. So, yeah, very, very cool to see. They're probably going to popularize there's a code blocks programming language. It's by Microsoft. I can't remember the actual name, but it might be code blocks. But you can also switch between MicroPython as well. So it's good to see that get out in front of kids. And some of the material they've got is really good. Like, it's just in browser editing, very quick and easy to get started.
Is that the original MicroPython hardware?
No, it's a new one. Yeah, it's a new one. So it's got like the little touch sensor on the logo and nice. Better processor and rest of it. So, yes, other funding news. I thought this was kind of interesting because Arduino raised a bunch of money, another 22 million, which takes their Series B funding up to 54 million. And what are they going to do with it? It's kind of all over the place, like strengthening their R&D team, growing in the US, accelerating go-to-market initiatives and customer support. I'm not sure what that means, but that was interesting. And Modular, who do the Mojo programming language, raised 100 million because they've put the word AI in their marketing, so people are falling over themselves to give them money. But it does sort of beg the question. I'd love to see MicroPython get some funding too. So if anyone's got like a rich uncle around or something, please reach out. In LVGL news, the creator and maintainer of the, pretty sure it was the creator, Amagon?
I think the original bindings.
Yeah. So Amagon did the bindings for MicroPython to LVGL, which they're wanting. They're actually, I was quite surprised that they're quite popular. Not that they're popular, but they're still fairly immature in the way that they operate, and there seems to be quite a few people using them, or at least the forum's pretty active. Anyway, I'm sure I'm saying your name wrong, Aniagon. But he's stepping down. He's going off to greener pastures, and so looking for another maintainer. It looks like they're going to be hiring someone for their Squareline commercial tool, which is a drag and drop GUI editor. It looks like that new hire will actually be taking over some of that. But if anyone wants to contribute or take a look at the bindings, it's a pretty cool concept. And Andrew's contributed a little bit to try to make it an easier way to build them. But the idea is that it kind of, if I understand right, it parses the header files from the LVGL.
Yeah, the bindings is an auto generator.
There's
a combination of
magic going on. But it generates like Python bindings to all the LVGL C calls and basically puts MicroPython wrappers around everything. But yeah, it looks like a really good way to do GUI development using LVGL. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll let you know how that progresses.
I've also gotten quite a lot of requests to figure out something like stubs for LVGL, right? Which is a pain in the behind, to say the least, because their generation of the bindings is well next to impossible for me to understand, right? And every time that someone points out, oh, but there's a good JSON file that you could parse, then someone else says, well, actually no. So I'd be interested to contribute to that, right? But I'm not deep enough into LVGL, and I don't have the time to spend actually to try and do that. But I think that would be a very welcome addition, right? But the ones that I've been able to generate are huge, right? There's a lot of bindings with a lot of duplication.
Yeah. Andrew's nodding. He's taking a look at trying to make that easier as well. So I've also offered our services. Sorry, Andrew, I threw you around under the bus there. But if this new hire does go ahead, we'll probably get on a call with the new hire at some point and just walk them through about what MicroPython's needs and wants are for those bindings. If you'd like to be involved, we'll get you involved. And it sends out to everyone. If anyone else would like to be involved in that, ramping someone up, our perspective might be a good way to get them more involved. So maybe.
Yeah, let me know.
Cool. Thanks, Jos. My new hardware. I had a fair bit of stuff come in this month. So the first one is the React Studio H7, which is an STM32 H743. The H7 range from ST are pretty powerful. They're Cortex M7s. Typically tons of memory, tons of GPU, tons of everything. So this one's got a mega flash. It's got 2 meg of, a meg of RAM, 2 meg of flash, 8 meg of SPI RAM, and another 8 meg of quad SPI. I'm saying RAM instead of flash. You can read it there. It's got a bucket load of flash, basically. So it's got a total of 18 meg of flash. It's a small little LCD there, which is non-optional on this board. I'll cover that in a second. But there is an optional camera plugged in that you can buy with it. There's 44 pins broken out. It's around 40 GPIO. And these are about $32, except they're all sold out at the moment.
Did you buy them all?
I only bought 2. I couldn't have bought that many. But React have a range of these boards, of the H7 range. So you can see at the bottom there's the H750, the H723, and the H7B0, all of which have slightly different but very similar specs. All of them are in the same form factor. All of them have bucket loads of stuff, and they're all pretty cheap, $18 to $28 for those other 3. And on those other 3 boards, the LCD is optional as well as the camera. But in terms of a dev kit, if you want to get into ST development, it's a pretty neat way to do it. I'm looking at using these perhaps at work for like as a test device because they've got plenty of GPIO. I've got a board definition for MicroPython ready to go for this one. And there's another guy, NSPSK. There's got another one for the 723 variant. So either of those 2 should be safe bets for running MicroPython. I also got the Pymaroni. I bought a couple of Pymaroni things, mostly because my dad, who's not able to come with us tonight, not able to be on, but he wants to power his model boat with a motor. And so I've got the Pymaroni motor board, which allows 4 DC motors to be powered from it.
What voltage?
Yeah, the voltage on this one's unfortunately a bit low.
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah. On the Inventor though, this one actually does it as, I think you can have a separate power line in this one, so you can power it to whatever the motor controller is. I can't remember which motor controller they use, but DRV8823 from memory. But this one only has 2 motors, but it has servos and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's also got Wi-Fi, which is quite neat, and Bluetooth, because it's just a Raspberry Pi PKW. Nice little boards though. And then the Galactic Unicorn, which we were looking at before and ogling at the various colors. Don't know if you can see that, but it's a really beautiful board. It's quite expensive. I mean, it's probably not for what it is, but yeah. So there's the Pomeranian stuff. I also got an NXP, and this is a hard one to say, that LPC Espresso 55 S69. It's somewhere here. It's a largish kind of dead board. Not much to say about this. There's one of the MicroPython users is looking to do a port for this, and so I was ordering some stuff from Mauser and threw this in as well. Although it was probably a mistake in the end, because their other range, the RT range, is probably more powerful and appropriate for what we would normally use. The key features for this one is they're a dual core processor, and the second processor's got DSP extensions and is quite fast for doing things like audio processing. I don't really have a use for it, but I was trying to help out other people in the community. Not cheap at $70 for those boards. And the last one I think was the Milk 5 Duo, which is a RISC-V, one of these things that are becoming popular now. RISC-V multi-core processor. These are capable of running Linux, and they're about $9. Or they could run MicroPython really fast. 64 meg of RAM. They've got video encoding and 100 meg Ethernet. It's pretty remarkable what you can buy these days. And you can also get it with a breakout board, so it breaks out that 100 meg Ethernet, as well as 4 USB. Pretty remarkable. Oh no, I did have one more thing, which was my new person sensor, or my new useful sensor, which is the tiny code reader, which is a tiny little thing. And it just reads QR codes. But they're a wonderful little device, because they're I2C, the interface is I2C, and all you do is kind of query a single register which tells you how many bytes it's picked up in the QR code. If it's 0, it doesn't have a QR code in the camera. If it's non-zero, you go read the rest of it and find out what was embedded in the QR code.
Is it flushable? Can you change the firmware on it?
That's just as it is. Yep.
If there was a high picker on there, then in theory you could, but
yeah,
then you should be starting from scratch yourself, I guess.
Yeah. But for $7 US, they're pretty amazing. Powered by Raspberry Pi, as Andrew said. They do have an interrupt pin, but I haven't seen that used yet. That's the little circle pin. But that would be useful for MicroPython, obviously. They also have that little break-off header, which is kind of cute. On the back, they've got like a stemma QT plug. So you can choose to use the breakout header if you want or not. Other hardware news. Just randomly in the Discord channel, someone was looking for an ESP32 to be powered by 12 volts, I think they were looking for. This one actually, I stumbled on this literally the day before, where someone's put together a C3 board, and the key feature is that it can be powered from 60 volts DC. They've got some sort of DC converter.
And they've got an inductor sitting right underneath the C3 module.
You don't ask questions like that.
Wow.
Don't know how good it would work, but yeah, for $20 US, you can go find out.
Yep.
A couple of little stemma QT connectors. Otherwise, it's a very bare bones sort of board designed to work with Home Assistant and ESP Home. You can go critique the design.
That's cool. If it doesn't interfere with it, right?
Yeah. They also, it was nice that they've got like the 5 volts and the 3v3 lines broken out as well, so you can power things from it, because yeah, that might be useful. M5 Stack had a few things, but the only one I sort of focused on was this one, which is the capsule kit. It's quite a small little box to hold one of their tiny little M5 Stamp S3s, which you buy with it. So it kind of plugs into that capsule. It's kind of like a backpack, I guess. And in that little backpack, you've got an IMU, you've got a microphone, you've got an RTC, all those other bits and pieces there. You get a little battery. So it's kind of like a little portable kind of device. And you can also prototype things in the back of it because you can still plug things into the headers here. So for $20, it's interesting little kit. Talked about Pymoroni stuff before, but the Pico Vision is something that they're working on, which is interesting. It looks like it's nearing completion. It hasn't been released yet, but they're looking at using 2 RP2040s in these things. And the second one's they're twiddling some pretty serious stuff with the PIO to generate DVI output, I presume, to drive larger screens. And so they're dedicating one RP2040 just purely to that. So yeah, not a lot of details on that yet, really, but it looks interesting. Software news: MicroPython. If you're using VS Code and you're using Raspberry Pis, this looks pretty neat. Actually, it's a VS Code extension. It does autocomplete, does some terminal integration, does all the sorts of things that the basics of MP Remote doesn't do mounting, as far as I could tell. But yeah, it looks like an interesting extension. So, yes, it was a fork of PyMaker. You're right. Yep. Yep. Which he was open and honest about. UI flow. Sorry. Yeah, worth having a look because we probably, people often ask for these extensions for VS Code, and we don't have a great story there. So it would be nice for some beginning users.
Yeah. So the PyMaker was kind of okay, right? I worked a lot of it. MicroPython is well, I think the second clone, right? Paul, I've worked with Paul. He's, I think, the second one that took over that. It's currently really restricted to Pythos, right? So if you can't scan the Python, it's not. That's actually code that was added that we might consider asking him, could you please remove it? Because PyMaker's left alone, or PyCom is gone, right? So PyMaker, right? I still get bug reports every now and then from them, but I can't commit to that repo, right? And I'm not, I don't have the time to take over it completely, right? But there's good stuff in there, so yeah, worth rescuing.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised when it was restricted to the Picos, but maybe it's just something we need to ask Paul if like you said, ask him.
It's a couple of lines, right? It's an option that he might want to add, but I think he's afraid of everyone else, right? If we see how many requests we get on Tony, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to field that number of requests.
Yeah, fair too. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the background. M5 Stack also released their community version of UI Flow. I don't quite understand how their release cycle works, but I think the way it worked is that, sorry, take a step back. UI Flow is an in-browser editor for the M5 Stack devices. So the idea is you log into their web page, you can drag and drop whichever of the M5 Stack devices, which includes their controllers, a whole bunch of ESP32 controllers, but as well as all of their peripherals. And you can just drag and drop, and then you can either use a blocky style editor, which also is a two-way editor to MicroPython as well. So that's what UI Flow is, and that's M5 Stack's project. They're not that keen to push anything upstream because they just want to keep doing their own project. Fair enough. You can also do updates to the devices from the browser as well if you're using Chrome, which is quite neat. Anyway, at some point they release UI Flow to, I guess, commercially and in a closed source fashion, but now they've released the community version, which they do mention that it's slightly different to the version that you get when you log on, but it's not clear how it differs. So reason all this is of interest to me is because they've got a whole bunch of drivers there for their devices, so it might be worth pilfering some of those. Building on them. And they've been quite open to having people do that, which has been good. It's an interesting editor to go look at, though. I encourage you to check it out.
It's like Scratch.
Yeah, they all look the same to me. They're useful for demonstrations and about nothing else. But Sam Neggs we've covered a few times in the past. This is an old one from April, I think, but he has Astro Miner now, which is kind of cool. Sam's doing all sorts of he's just looking what he can do with MicroPython and Viper and assembly built in. So this is quite cute. It is huge. Yeah, just it's massive. And it's also problematic. I should have mentioned before, the UI flow stuff, they tend to go their own way in whatever methods they use. So like the displays are all, like the primitive methods are all their own thing and not compatible with frame buff and whatnot. So it's a bit of a challenge. This goes on for a while. We won't look at it all. I did want to show towards the end, it goes into a different mode where you can't see anything except when the rocket's thing, like you can see how, which I thought was cute. It was nice. And collision detection is not perfect. But it looks like it's just the body of the ship. But, yeah, pretty high frame rate considering this is pure MicroPython with Viper and some assembly for that collision detection method. Anyway, that was cool. He also had a plasma effect, similar sort of deal. It just kind of looks kind of trippy, kind of cool look. Yeah, code's all available. Go check it out if it's of interest here. Tulip, which we have covered a few times in the past, which is this project to get MicroPython running on various devices with displays. But yeah, recently it was ported to the LVGL T-Deck, which is that device you can see there with the display, keyboard, and trackpad all integrated. They're about $43 US. But yeah, it looks like a little portable MicroPython device. Looks like a little BlackBerry running MicroPython, which is pretty snazzy. Worth checking out. But Bhavesh Kakwani is back. He was doing tutorial a while ago, but got busy doing actual work. He's got a new one now for how to use JSON files to configure your MicroPython project. He's done a great job of writing it up and recording a video. So if that's of interest to you, I love his images too. He's been using Midjourney as well. So. And I think we covered OpenMV. OpenMV have been busy working on this. They changed their process because of the difficulties in getting the processes that they previously used. So this micro is one of the NXP-RT 1062s and was just recently approved for production. So they're starting to roll those out now. Pixel Time Watch. This is kind of retro cool, like a bunch of LEDs. There's a 15:8 matrix of LEDs in the top of the half of this watch. By Modular, I don't know, not related to the Mojo Modular people. Some developer who's published all of their stuff on GitHub as well, which is kind of cool. Looks good. MicroPG Lite was released as well, which is based on the eerily similar name, MicroPG, which is MicroPython Postgres library. This one's designed to use even less memory than MicroPG, which was already pretty light. So that's pretty cool. Trades off a couple of features. So there's a couple of things you can't do with the light version, as you sort of expect. But he's been able to get that running on an ESP32S3, which is no mean feat given the memory constraints. There was a Bezier demo. Spelled that wrong. This is all pure MicroPython. There's actually no acceleration in this. It's not particularly fast, but the code's available to see how you can render this in a frame buff. It's just kind of a neat way to show how Beziers work. Yep. Good. I'll let you watch that in your own time. And some conference news. There's been a few that have had some content that you may be interested in. EuroPython had quite a few, in particular the one by Entol and Fabio Plagia, who were talking about PyScript, and they've basically rewritten PyScript, but they're pushing forward using MicroPython as well as Python. It's a pretty interesting talk, worth having a look. Espressif had the DevCon 2023 a little while ago. All those videos are available now. There's some interesting topics there. And there was two PyCons, one in CZ, it's going to be Czech Republic, and the other one's in Uganda, both of them which had some MicroPython topics. Neither of them have videos available yet, but I'm sure they're coming out. Don't know if the Czech ones will be in English or Czech. And Simon, who presented last month, has also continued to be busy. He's got like a carbon intensity display with using the Raspberry Pi Pico and the same graphics pack that he used with our demo. And he's also been doing plane spotting stuff, storing plane information as they fly nearby. Really good write-ups. Good work, Simon. Thank you. What else did I have? Just a couple of mid-journey images. I was looking for a snake sitting on top of piles of electronics. And that's what I managed to get. I think that's all I got for you, folks.
The next release, 1.21, will hopefully be by the end of this week. Going to just cut it as it is and get it out because it's been too long. And just going through testing on hardware, finding a few things here and there that need to be fixed before we can make a release. So that would be good, finally. But yeah, there's always a constant stream of fixes and pull requests, but you just have to draw the line. And then, well, the rest of the things will go in after the release. No problem there.
I was alluding before to SSL being one of the things that you were trying to get across the line for 1.21. Is that still?
Yeah, there'll be. We've gotten halfway, but not the full way. It's just requires more time, and I think it's better to do that later because we did get IDF5 support, and I think ESP now hasn't seen a release yet.
Oh right, yeah.
So there's quite a few things in there that will be good to get into a release.
Actually, one of the topics I didn't talk about was a project that was using ESP now to synchronize between multiple devices to change the color of something. And it's remarkable how fast, all of them were looking pretty close to simultaneous. Yeah. It's pretty
Was
good.
it using ESP32 or 8266?
32.
32, yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Hey everyone. So a project I've been working on, this is the second revision, is an ESP32S3 based, fully featured, like a watch board that has a capacitive touch 280 by 240 screen connected to it, which is obviously designed to sit like this. So the watch sits at the back of the screen. It's basically like an Apple Watch type screen. And so the project's going to be fully open source. I just want to get a working board of it first, and it's packed with features. It's got under voltage protection and I2C fuel gauge, low power RTC that power on off like soft switch, so the battery can charge even when the watch isn't turned on to use it. It's got a BMI 270 6-axis IMU. I also want to stick a magnetometer on there, possibly. I've got one coming in a couple of days to play with. Not that I really have any room to put it. Yeah, that's kind of got traces everywhere. But anyway, so the whole point is that it's an open source ESP32S3 watch. Originally, I designed it on the C6, so I think the C6 is a much better chip for a watch because it's got Wi-Fi 6 and it's lower power for Wi-Fi and stuff. But it you can't do PSRAM with it, and so how do you do a nice display with lots of nice graphics when you don't have enough memory? So anyway, there's some people that want to hack away with CircuitPython on it. There's a couple of people who want to hack away with MicroPython on it. I'm currently putting together just a basic Arduino platform IO thing for it as well, but hopefully I'll have some boards available that people can buy off me, and the design will be open. People can go and make their own, and they can fork it and modify it and make it better or worse or whatever. But anyway, so I built it today, and I wanted to bring it with tonight to show Matt, and so I stuck it in the ultrasonic cleaner to let it clean, and then stuck it in the dryer and pulled it out after 10 minutes because I had to run, and it was a little bit wet still, I think, and I plugged it in and powered it on, okay, water and power on electronics, not a good combination. Anyway.
We did witness, we can verify we did see this all work.
Yeah, it turns on and it works, but it keeps restarting itself. Not brown out on the chip. The soft switch keeps shutting itself down and then starting itself up again. So it's a bit frustrating. So it works in like 3-second intervals. But anyway, it's something that I've been working on for a while, and I've always wanted to build a watch. Not that I need a watch, a perfectly good watch, and this will never be as good as an Apple Watch. But I thought it'd be a
that attitude.
So not with that attitude. Well, not with my software anyway. Maybe someone else can make it anyway. But I wanted to make something that people could also build and extrapolate on. So anyway, that was it.
A couple of things.
What sort of battery does it have?
So the battery, well, you can plug whatever battery you want, but batteries have a real issue. Like unless you're Apple and you can design your own battery in any shape you want that fits inside your watch. I found these little batteries that when you sandwich it all together and a case, it only works out to, the Apple Watch is deceiving because it's actually really thick at the bottom. You just can't see from the side, it's tapered. But this works out to only about 2 millimeters thicker than the Apple Watch, allowing for a 2 millimeter shell of a case for it to sit in. The problem is they say that this is a, they say it's a 450 milliamp hour battery, and there's not a chance. It's more like 100 milliamp hours. So I don't know how long it's going to last for. Obviously, the screen can be, you know, the backlight can be taken off and the whole thing can be put to sleep. And I've actually got wake up from the touch, hopefully, if I can test it, onto the RTC, which they can then wake up the ESP32 from deep sleep. So when you're not using the watch, it might last you half a day or a day, but as soon as you actually start using it, you're probably going to get about an hour out of it. So I don't know yet. I mean, that's someone else's problem. Like, you know, someone else can find a bigger battery, but finding a battery is hard because the shapes are really bad. So the next size up is either too long or it's too thick or whatever. So I'll keep hunting for batteries, but yeah, maybe we'll have to start a thing where we go and find old Apple Watches and rip their batteries out and steal those. I don't know. But anyway, I'm hoping that collectively a whole bunch of people can work it out and not left on me to do. So I'm just starting it off.
Cool, very cool. Thank you.
Sorry?
Unlike Apple, can you replace your own battery?
Well, the whole thing, you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, you know, if you want to stick a really thick battery in there, like, and have a watch that's this thick on your arm, you can strap on whatever you want. Yeah.
Make it a timepiece.
Yeah, you can put a battery, you know, as a power bank in your pocket with a cable down your sleeve and into your watch. Whatever you want to do.
Actually, there's one thing that I want to throw out there. I've been playing around with Wokwi, right? So I'm not sure if you know that, but that also runs MicroPython in an emulator in the browser or in VS Code. In the browser, it's nice because then you have one window where you can type your code, but then it's only going to be one file, right? Which is kind of limiting, right? You can't use libraries or anything like that. And they also have currently a version that runs in VS Code, which then had another problem because I couldn't get my code that I had on my file system into that emulator. So I've been playing around with two things. One is that I did an update to MP Remote so that it can connect to serial over TCP and upload the code that way. I also, and there's a small PR, it's 3 lines of code that I needed to add, so that was nothing. And I've got another thing that I'm more curious about what to do with it, because I found a way to take the little FS image and merge that together with the MicroPython firmware, both for the ESP32s as well as for the RP2040. But there's some magic numbers that I need to grasp from, okay, where is that image at? For RP2, I can hack it together, right? Through some firmware magic where it seems to be recorded in the image somewhere. But I was wondering, right? I've seen the question a lot of times, right? I've had it myself years ago already. Okay, I've built this firmware, but if I put it on the web, then people still need to figure out a way to download it, move my code over to a device before they can deploy it. This way, it would be very simple, even in a CI/CD workflow, just to take, okay, I'll merge that code and do test or do whatever, right? Or just ship it, right? Publish it as a .bin to the web. It works for me, right? So limited testing, it works on my machine and 4 MCUs. It works in the emulators as well. Would this be interesting to add to MicroPython or as a side project, right? What do you think?
Sorry, so you're saying you're packaging an application into an LFS, a little LFS image,
and then merging that with the MicroPython firmware, so that as soon as you flash that firmware to a device, just using ESP tool or UF2, that it just works, right? The application just starts up, right? I just replace the non-existing file system with an existing file system, and MicroPython then just says, okay,
Yes.
this is my second boot. Things are good to go. Let's run.
Yep. So so you could
I can
independently
demo it, I think, right? I didn't think about starting it up, but I can probably demo it in 15 seconds if you want.
Yeah, I understand what you're doing. This could we have oh, what can I say? Yeah, I have done similar things before, but never really done it into a proper tool. But this idea of making a linear mappable file system, memory mappable file system, so that you can have sort of frozen code dynamically added to your image is something that we've been in the works for a long time.
Well, this works with just the current images, right? No changes needed to the firmware at all.
Yes, but in this case, yeah, it's a file system, and so when you import the files from the file system, it loads them into memory.
Oh, so yeah, well, so it doesn't have the advantage of freezing the code, right? So it is still just code on a file system. For a development cycle, though, I find it very useful, right? It allows me to test out devices much quicker, even with doing away with the serial, right? Because that slows things down, right? It's just press and run, right? So
can you just flash the file system and not the image, the firmware?
So yes, I've tried that as well, and it works, right? Because so if it's a UF2 file, that just works, because UF2 I've built my own parser, reverse engineer stuff. That actually is from Microsoft, right? I work for the guys as well, so. But it's open source, right? It's part of, it's available. The parsers aren't that great, so I've built my own little parser, and it turns out to be very simple. Just put in the blocks there. Yeah. We can even put in more information in smaller files if we want to, right? So it ain't that complicated. I think it's under-documented though, right? And it's under-tooled.
Yeah. So with UF2, so you can put the address of the file system in your image, and it will just copy that across.
And the only thing that I'm now struggling with is okay, so I can parse some of the header files and what have you to magically get the starting addresses, right? But I'm not actually. I've needed to kind of reverse engineer that, right? For me to get the first working erlebnis took quite some time, and then I started tracking back. Okay, where do the addresses come from? So that's definitely something that I would love to sanity check with someone, right? Because I'm just one guy looking at a massive amount of code, and then there's lots of different ports. So I'm looking at the correct numbers, and for now I've just drawn that together in a little table, added that to my own tool, right? And there's currently just a few of them, and also I have a limited supply of hardware to test it on, right? So I know it works on my stuff, right? But there's plenty of other stuff out there. So just wondering, right? Is this something? What's the best approach? Currently it's part of another project of mine. I'll split it off to a separate repo, right? Or should I just start building a PR into MicroPython? That's essentially my question.
I think I suggest to keep it as your separate project for now. As I was saying, we do have plans to do sort of a frozen version of this where the file system is, well, not a little FS, but our own invention, which can be memory mapped. And then when you import the file from that file system, it runs from the file system and doesn't have to be loaded into memory. So it's not as good as freezing, but it's close. So that's, and the workflow there will be similar, I think, to what you're doing in that you will prepare the file system offline.
Yeah, makes sense, right? Then you have two different things, right? And whether you run it in an emulator or on actual hardware, that really doesn't matter, then, right? Okay.
That's right.
Thanks.
But
thanks for the feedback.
Okay, you're welcome.
You also mentioned Wokwi. I was going to talk about that too. For the time I ran out, but for those, Wokwi's come along a little further, and I thought like the really interesting thing was that people can submit their own projects now, and there's quite a lot of them. So if you're using Wokwi, the startup I think has gotten much better. So if you want to start a NeoPixel ring, that's it's just a couple of clicks away. It takes a little while to get to the point where it's running, but it's a really remarkably good editor.
So this is simulating in the browser, is it?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
What's the actual backend emulator?
He's done it himself.
Because this is emulating it. No, this is emulating the extensor architecture, I guess. So is he written in extensor?
Yes, and for several other chips as well, including STM32s, but he's only got the smaller boards. He's got the RP2 as well, including things like PO emulation, which has a really cool debugger for PO, where you can actually see your PO program running.
Yeah.
Wow.
And single step it. It's right.
It's a really good tool. And I've seen a couple of like tutorials written about how to do things, and some of them now start with you start in Wokwi and you render it here, and then okay, now you've proven it works, copy that file to your device, and away you go. It's gotten pretty good.
Yeah, and so how do I show?
Yuri, the creator of Wokwi, has given a few talks on the innards of it. It's worth having a listen. It's very interesting, especially how he reverse engineered the Wi-Fi side of things as well. So you can actually make Wi-Fi calls from your ESP32 simulated device, and it actually pops out from the browser and reaches out, and you can make those calls from inside the browser.
Yeah, and if you run this thing on your desktop, which currently is still free, but he's going to make into a paid version, then you also have the serial interface, right, into the Wi-Fi, and that's how I'm currently using it quite a bit, because that this also allows me to have simple setups, right? And like I said, right, I press Shift Control B, the code is packaged up into that little FS file system. If you have a second, I can share that, right? So this is just a little project, right? Actually, so this is the same code, right? So if I now press compile, then it starts to merge the VFS, right? At least it should, and that's what you get for terminals. And then in the simulator, it loads that, and then loads up that project, and it automatically loads the code, because that's now made part of the firmware image, right? And contrary to what Matt showed, right? So in this case, I just import a foo and a bar, right? The libraries on the system, which are there somewhere, right? And so it just executes the booting period part, and this stuff just happily runs in the emulator with all my code, right? The only thing that, right, normally if I run this on the website, if you will, then I also have the debugger, and I can still pause it, right? But I can't single step it, right? I can still see the state of the different pins, right? So that is something, but single step debugging, which he also offers in the browser, hasn't made it into the extension yet. right? So that's another tool, right? And I like tinkering with tools as well. So, did I share that or did I forget to share it at all?
Didn't share it.
Yeah.
I got
Let
the
me
gist of
run
it.
that. Let me run that by one more time. So my setup is I've got my source directory with okay, now finally I'm sharing. Sorry, used two different tools. So I've got my source directory, I've got a couple of tools set up, and it failed, right? But I'll be shamed again, right? So I've got a task set up in my editor that then merges merges the source code into an image, right? So I've got a couple of different simulations set up for the ESP32, for the Pico W, and then essentially what I'm trying to do is take stock firmware and then merge that into a new image. And then once that started, right? Let me just restart the emulator, right? And if I then start the emulator, then the emulator is configured to just load that image, right? And that then has loaded the firmware and just starts executing things, right? Sorry, by the steps for merging it failed. I've been playing around too much probably, right? But here you see it just does the booting. It loads something from the two libraries that are in the source directory, and that's something that you currently can't get on the website. And I like a local development cycle more, right? So. Right, so the tools that I just use is well, some of the tools that I've written myself, and Pico tool to get some of the magical addresses, right? So seems to be very doable. I'll package that up and see if it's useful to others as well. So.
That's cool. Yep. All right. Well, should we wrap it up there? Or does anyone have any questions or?